Hey, we're live. We're just going to do a hangout on some critiques of street epistemology. High probability that this will come down. So if you want to get dirt on me or other SEers, do your own recording because it might not be here tomorrow. Okay, so what were we talking about?
Well, I guess I'll start us off. I joined the NCG group on a show called The Place, which they also stream on YouTube, and it's led by Michael Jones, who is a former pastor and a expert linguist, and he's fascinated with the Bible and Jesus, and calls himself a multi-axial theist, um, and so that's this show called The Place. He decided to talk about criticisms that philosopher Stephen Hoyt wanted to address against street epistemology, and Stephen had done a bit of research into what the movement was about. He based his judgments on what Anthony Magnabosco and Peter Boghossian put out as promotion and explanation for what SE is supposed to be, and he used that to make a judgment about how it's normatively practiced, and he was allowed to join the critique SE group and put forth some of his objections, but it wasn't quite as well received because I think some of the objections he had do not apply to many of the practitioners, because each of us come at SE a little bit differently, perhaps, and we've formed our own codes of conduct, and each of us have investigated epistemology to varying degrees. And Stephen got the impression that from the SE community's response to him, he got the impression that the SE community is a bit too cavalier with epistemology.
Yeah, can I stop you there,
And,
Jordan? In
yeah.
my opinion, I think this is a big issue.
Yeah.
If you love philosophy, if you've studied philosophy, if you have 30 or more credit hours in philosophy, you're going to hate the word epistemology behind the word street. It's going to be offensive. And so my advice to any philosophers out there is just let it go. Just imagine this is a word used incorrectly in the wrong context. View this as just interview, asking questions, and try to remove that urge to view this as anything professional. Actually, if I was on that show tonight, that's what I would have said. And what Jordan, what do you think how would they have responded?
You say you would deny that we come at it professionally? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I'm not a professional. Reed's not a professional. You're not a professional. Cam's not a professional
Yeah.
a philosopher, epistemologist. Although I do have this.
Yeah.
Right, I saw that. Yeah.
I am SE certified. I'm a freelance epistemologist. I've been a member since near the beginning, and it has an infinite expiration. So, and by the way, if anybody wants one of these for the low price of $9.95, I can SE certify you as well. If you want to become a real epistemologist, just let me know.
Where does the barcode go, Doug?
Oh, the barcode is, that's a great question, Cam. Anybody who signs up to become a certified street epistemologist, that barcode, you just put that, those little kiosk things at the tables at Applebee's? If you scan that at Applebee's, you get a free apple crisp dessert.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. There's probably an expiration on that, isn't there?
This is exactly how I would handle a guy like Stephen Hoyt. The way I'm talking now. No, I'm serious. And Stephen Hoyt, I'm assuming you're going to hear this, and I'm okay with it. You need to laugh. You need to, Stephen Hoyt. You need to turn that frown upside down and smile a little bit. Man. Okay, someone take over. I'm getting worked up.
So, Jordan, you were talking about the way in which you began engaging with the critique street epistemology group.
Mm-hmm. And I hadn't kept a real close eye on it. I just, I would read his posts and see a comment here or there, but I did get an overall impression that it was a bit antagonistic, I guess.
A bit.
Yeah.
Just a smidgen.
Yeah, and I figured, I was like, I feel like that's going to get in the way of the reception of this. Like, people aren't going to approach this with open minds, and even if there is a valid criticism here, it's not going to be received well.
Should we look at an example, or is that just too personal or too specific?
Sure.
I mean, yeah, if you want to quote something, fine.
So it's not for the purpose of. I have a wider point to make, but if I can finally get things to load.
Before you do, I think it's fair to say he was doing this on purpose. He said he was doing this as like a psychological tactic. I think he called it mirroring. So he was doing it on purpose to get a rise out of people, I think. But he was really trying to get people to legitimately counter his criticisms. I just don't understand why he was doing it so adversarially.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I think the approach I would have taken would be more of a didactic approach. I would have tried to portray myself as a teacher, and just kind of offer advice, or as SE, as we like to do in SE, is pose questions to guide a conversation in a certain direction.
Yeah, so I think he made like about 15, maybe 10 or so, 10 to 15 posts in the last week in the group. Each which didn't have, in my view, like a very clear purpose as to what the point was that was being made. Some of them felt a little bit all over the place, and it wasn't clear what was expected of the members in terms of responding to this so-called critique. But in his last post in the group, this is a flavor of the type of criticism. There's so much doublespeak here, and insincerity, disingenuousness, and that's how the beginning of the post starts. I wonder if, like what you said, Jordan, or I think Reed, maybe that's intentional, but it seems counter to what his stated goal was, which seemed to be to educate people or show how SE was, had a poor epistemological foundation. So,
I mean, I love being educated by people insulting me.
Yeah, it seems against his goals, but maybe that's exactly what his goal was. I don't know. He did mention in the live stream today that what he is going to do is he's going to state every single argument that he made, or every single criticism of, say, for example, reliabilism. And he's going to take that criticism, and then he's going to model how the best philosophers would respond to that kind of criticism, which I thought was interesting. And it sounds like a lot of work because, as I mentioned, he's posted over 10 times in the group. But we'll have to wait and see whether or not he holds up that end of the agreement.
Right.
So, Jordan, you seem to know more about the inner machinations of the mind of Stephen Hoyt than the rest of us. If if all the SEers in quotes were just interviewing, think of the worst set of beliefs out there, and you all had them neatly packed and packaged into a cult name, and all SEers did was ask questions of those people, would Stephen Hoyt say anything? These are the types of questions I would ask if I was on there tonight.
Yeah, I think you have more experience with coming up with these questions, and yeah. So I do want you to get the chance to have this dialogue, but I thought maybe not at the place right now, especially with how late in the show you had asked to join. I was like, we'll save it for next time maybe or something. But
seriously, like, how would a guy like Stephen answer that question? Like, are you against me raising doubt in this terrible, rotten, just destructive cult that's doing harm in society? Would he then be ranting about reliabilism?
Well, I think we all agreed that, like, beliefs have consequences, and so, like, the ultimate question is what is at stake, and a big part of the objection is that one of his objections is that we're not forthright about why we're doing it. Probably. At the same time, I think we've made some strides with that, with our codes of conduct in that regard. But I don't know if and I pointed this out on the show as well. Sometimes we use our words related to this a little bit differently. For example, doubt. And I think we've touched on this before, where doubt can mean a couple things, and Anthony, I think, tends to think of doubt to mean questioning, and that is one way of thinking of it. But at the same time, I think more formally or in academic circles, doubt is kind of like the opposite of belief, right? So it's like to believe something is to doubt its the contrary, and or at least that's equivalent, I think. And so in that sense, it's like to get someone to doubt is the same thing as trying to get them to believe. And so it shows a parallel between what we do as SEs and what street preachers are doing, where they're trying to propagate a belief, and we're trying to propagate doubt. If doubt means the opposite of belief, then there is some equivalence there. So
okay, I like when I say that we use the word doubt, and a lot.
Yeah, because what I would say we're after critical thinking. We want people to think critically.
Inquiry.
When I use inquiry, question, like, without a doubt, I believe this. That means without question, I believe it. It's like, like, come on, people. It's good to ask questions. It's good to learn. It's good. This is my deeply held belief. Okay, it's good to learn new things. It's good to question your deeply held beliefs. This is a deeply held belief I have, and please don't take it away from me. Please, I will lose all hope in humanity if you take that away from me, and I need this to survive.
Here, in fact, let me try. I think what I've seen with our interactions with presuppositionalists, their obsession with certainty is, it's like if they internally get themselves to think that they have certainty in their beliefs, then it makes it easier to conduct themselves accordingly. And so they're desperately trying to motivate themselves to behave according to their morals, and internalizing that certainty is what they think will do it. Because if they doubt their moral principles, they feel that will lead them back to sin.
Okay, I hear that. I hear that doubt's the opposite of faith in a lot of ways. But earlier you said that they view street epistemology as a type of street preaching, like that you see the conservative evangelical.
Yeah, like there's some equivalence there. Yeah,
okay,
there's equivalence there.
Now hear me loud and clear.
Potentially.
I love evangelical Protestant street preaching. I love it, and I want to see more. I am a free speech guy. If they're on public lands and want to state what they believe, let them. I encourage it. So in the same way, these people who are against atheists evangelizing doubt or whatever, why are you taking away my free speech rights? I want to preach the gospel of doubt. Don't we live in the land of the free and the home of the brave? Like, this is even that critique of this is just evangelizing atheism. I'm willing to grant them that if they want it. Excuse you. No burping on my live stream.
Yeah, I tried to do it away from the microphone. I don't think it worked.
Like professionals have like a burp button.
Yeah, I didn't have a mute button here, but I didn't bother using it. I was preparing to say something. So I think, generally speaking, I think it's right to say that theism and atheism are epistemologically indistinguishable, right? Would you say that like that's kind of what agnosticism is about? We can't tell.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you say that again? Can you state what you said from the beginning again?
Yeah, like theism and atheism are epistemologically indistinguishable. We can't tell which one is right. We can't say with regard to gods generally whether there is one or not.
Not absolutely, but we can have different levels of confidence, which I think are justified.
Yeah, so it depends what you're meaning by epistemology, because there is a certain subsets within philosophy that would agree with that statement, because they don't allow credences. They're not talking about justification with respect to credences. They're talking about justification with respect to affirming propositions that don't involve your epistemic state. So it's the difference between saying proposition snow is white versus a proposition like I'm 90% confident that snow is white. And so one of those propositions like has no content within it which refers to your epistemic state, whereas another one does. And so when you say the statement that epistemology is not, well, I mean, this is like a rephrasing, but when you say something like epistemology is considers the statement no gods exist to be indistinguishable from the statement that at least one God exists, that would only be true if you're considering theories of knowledge that fall into the category we were talking about before. Whereas, like, it wouldn't really be applicable to other forms of epistemology that I actually find map more closely to how we conduct ourselves epistemically in the world. For example, like, I think that you can be there with respect to our credences, you can be more or less confident in the proposition that theism is true. Like, with respect to the states that our beliefs can have, they're not limited to affirming the proposition that a God exists and affirming the negation of the proposition that a God exists. Does that make sense?
A little more.
So, like the statement, a God exists, if it were the case that the only epistemic states we could have as humans with respect to that proposition is affirmation of it or affirmation of its negation, then that's like a very limited form of epistemology that is actually practiced in philosophy. I get probably a little bit more traditional, like maybe what people were focused on a little bit more in the 20th century and prior. But there's a lot of work that's gone on within epistemology that focuses on different types of propositions. For example, propositions which express credences toward another proposition, and then the justification of those credences. And so there's a field of epistemology that focuses on the justification of credences, not the justification of the affirmation of the proposition. Does that make sense?
I think
it's
so.
Like the object of the thing that's being justified is different in either case. The object of the thing that's being justified in one scenario is the justification of your credence in the proposition. Right. And in the other scenario, the thing that's being justified is the proposition itself.
So it's the difference between asking why is it true and why do you think it's true?
Kind of. It's the difference between asking what is the justification for affirming it's true versus what is the justification for the credence you hold with respect to affirming it's true. And they're quite different things, and there have been different tools developed under the broad banner of epistemology that focus on answering those questions. And yeah, so like when you say something like, with respect to a proposition, some God exists, or its negation, the field of epistemology considers those indistinguishable. It really depends on what you mean. Like whether or not you're meaning to say that like epistemology has no bearing on whether or not we're justified in holding a certain credence with respect to those propositions or not, or whether or not anyway, I blabbed on too much.
I for people who have no idea what we're talking about, there was a NCG Studios hosted by a guy named Michael Jordan. This is your cue. Michael
Jones.
They had a guy named Stephen Hoyt who's been very critical of SE on the SE Facebook critique page, and so they were discussing this. I came late to the party, but Reed, Cordial Curiosity, came on, and I thought that a wonderful, brilliant, amazing job. And I don't give out compliments easy, just ask Cam, because he never's gotten one from me.
Thank you.
But one thing I noticed, and if anybody watches back, it's a long live stream, but the last hour I saw, if anybody watches back, Michael Jones, it almost like, and if Michael Jones, if you ever watch this, I'm telling this to your face, it almost seems like you're saying these poor people, you're asking them these questions and they don't even know why they believe things, and you might squash their hope by raising doubt, and they need this hope. People have terrible lives. What you're doing is terrible, you SEers. This is the impression I got from him. Am I wrong or right, Jordan?
I would just nuance that a little bit in the sense that he wants us to be cautious about how we go about it, such that if we are to question the foundations of their hope, we need to be ready to
be there for them.
Support them in whatever way they need.
Okay, so now I think, this is my opinion and I could be wrong, I think this is what maybe is the first or second reason what all this criticism is about. It doesn't. I don't think it's really about reliabilism and philosophy, and all, whatever. It's about they don't want people hurt. I think this is what this is really about. And then secondly, it's about, hey, I've studied epistemology, and to put the word epistemology behind street is offensive to me, so stop it. That's the second reason, in my opinion. Now, the first reason, I agree. We don't want to hurt people. And I think guys like Reed and Anthony and other SEers I've seen have done an amazing job of knowing when to stop and knowing when to back off.
Right. We didn't really actually cover our codes of conduct with regard to that. Like, if we realize that, the interviewee has like a mental illness or something that might relate to it, and then we're like, oh, okay, maybe we need to back off. It would be unethical to proceed.
But that criticism does not apply to the PineCreek YouTube channel, because they know going in what they're getting themselves into. I target apologists and pastors. I put them in the hot seat. They do this for a living, a lot of them. They talk in front of hundreds of people regularly. I'm not going to treat them like a baby. Now, I'm probably one of the nicest atheist channels out there. Right? Is that true?
Yeah, you're Canadian.
I would say you how should I say this? You are.
We might be losing your connection soon.
No, and this is not a critique, by the way. I would say you. I guess I could say you empathize with them, to a much higher degree than most.
Yeah.
You understand them.
Yeah.
Pretty well.
I think you're kind, and you're certainly not insulting, and you don't use bad language, which creates a friendly environment. And you're very friendly.
Yeah.
But I think that you are harsh, because I think you ask very challenging questions, and ones that the type of questions that they don't want to answer.
Yeah, see,
why do I need Jesus?
To be honest, I couldn't really take Stephen Hoyt's criticism seriously, because he used the F word once, and it just offended me.
I noticed that. I thought that the host might have been wincing a little bit at that.
No. In fact, Michael's even had some language himself.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear.
No, they do keep it pretty, sparse, but yeah.
So
they can get passionate on the show.
There was one criticism that Stephen offered during the live stream, which resonates with me, and is a criticism that I made early on when engaging with the SE community. And that is whether or not during the course of an interview, somebody can actually present accurately the reasons why they came to believe something, or the reasons that they even hold. And that's never been that clear to me, especially because as humans, like Stephen rightly points out, and also Reed agreed with, we don't come to our beliefs by way of deliberative reasoning the majority of the time. We form them quite implicitly through deliberative processes that have more to do with how we're wired as humans.
And Doug likes to say that beliefs come first, the reasons come later, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think that there's a lot of research in psychology that actually bears that claim out. And so I think it is a valid criticism, but yeah, I don't know what to make of it. Because...
Yeah, and I often get that sense when I get engaged with someone on their beliefs, and if we ever get to that point where I think I'm ready to present evidence to them, and I present something, and then sure enough, even though they said that they would change their minds if such evidence were presented, I present it, and they don't change their minds like they said they would. And so, I think probably with enough experience with that type of debating, we have experience with this. We see that sometimes people are not even. It's not even necessarily that they're dishonest about the reasons. It's that they may not be conscious of them.
Another thing I noticed in the live stream was where they actually offered a couple of ideas about what would make SE better, or things that SES could do which would be better. And almost everything they said were things that I already know SEs to have thought about and to even put in practice in their interviews with people.
Yeah, what were some of those things we discussed? I think.
So, for example, Stephen talked about the possibility of, instead of actually having the object of the discussion be a belief that's deeply held, instead to be a conversation about the general, about epistemology in general, and about how. And so it is actually the case that SEs have pursued those avenues, in particular with the Ferrari experiment, with the aid of using tic tacs as a method to talk about epistemology, where their belief in question is not the object of focus. So, there were some other examples I heard as well. For example, the host of the show, I keep forgetting his name, but he mentioned how, like, it's important to understand what the person, or how the person is defining something. And then he made the claim that SES often equivocate on definitions. But interestingly, that is something that SES really don't want to do. Like, and it's explicitly stated that, like, our goals are to not equivocate, to not introduce definitions of our own into, like, the person's reasoning process. And so it just sort of seemed like something that we already try to do.
Hey, Reed, I know I know there's some dominant personalities in this hangout here, so if you want to say something, just raise your pinky or your finger.
Yeah, a little soft-spoken. Speak up.
Yeah, and basically, Cam, you were talking about the criticism that just because people give a reason for why they think something is true doesn't mean that's actually a reason. But these reasons are just conscious justifications giving to another person. But our beliefs are complicated. We're human. We don't even understand our psychology completely at all. So we're just trying things to see what causes people to kind of move in their confidence. And we're just doing this by trial and error. And it seems like some of these things are more effective versus other techniques. And I think related to psychology is that when we ask someone why they believe something, and we ask more questions that kind of reveal how they may be unreliable or contradictory to other stated beliefs or values that they hold, like, people want to be seen as consistent. That's a psychological need for people. Cognitive dissonance is all about that. People don't like to hold two conflicting views in their brains at the same time. It's uncomfortable. So that's related to psychology. And also, we're social creatures. We want to be virtuous. A norm in liberal societies is we should believe true things. So we could talk about beliefs related to that value and stuff like that. Just simple as that.
You mentioned like, I think you might have referred to it as, like, it's virtuous to believe true things. And it occurred to me, as we've talked about doxastic and voluntarism before, that if what we come to believe is not a matter of choice, or not simply a matter of choice, then it's not virtuous in that sense. It's not a moral issue, because that implies, like, obligation or the ability to choose. And if it's not a simple matter of choice, then what we believe, it's almost like it happens to us. It's not something we can choose. Now, how we respond to them is a matter of choice.
Yeah. just because we have no choice over our beliefs, I don't understand how that relates to whether something is actually virtuous. Like, it seems that we have this norm that we have produced through kind of cumulative cultural evolution of, the value of truth. And there's this norm here. It exists in society. And I value it through no fault of my own. That's just how I am. And I think it's good. I could be wrong. In order to have me change that value, something would have to happen to me, or someone would have to talk to me and have me experience something to make me change out of that position. But I have to talk to someone, or something has to happen to me. So I don't know.
Have we struck up any conversations in the chat on YouTube? I haven't really looked.
Well, that's why I'm looking one direction. I'm focusing this ear on you guys and my eyes on the chat. So I'm being pretty active.
Yeah, it looks like Diana showed up, the lavender lady.
Oh, that's Diana, the one who was on the show?
Uh-huh.
Oh,
hi, Diana.
Diana, I said boom. Chakalaka. When you commented, when you came on, I said, this is why SCers do what they do. You nailed it.
Yeah. That was something I wanted to get in about, like when it's right to challenge someone's perspective, perhaps aggressively, maybe, I don't know. Things like the kid that got bullied at 9 years old so much that he committed suicide like 4 days later, where like these kids, perhaps through no fault of their own, just got this impression that being homosexual is disgusting and something to be ostracized, and like just a matter of being attracted to the same sex is bad. And while most adults, even Christians, understand, like, okay, your attraction's not a matter of choice, so that's not in itself a sin. They understand, they get that the sin is in like how you respond to it potentially. The kids don't pick up on that little nuance, and because homosexuality is
because
deemed
it's
a
generally
sin,
meaningless in practice, in my opinion. But
right? Yeah,
the sin and not the sinner. It still denies a person's agency to act on their own, feelings.
Yeah. They're still painted as being outsiders or inferior or irredeemable sometimes, but yeah. So the fact that homosexuality is still considered a sin, that in itself is, you could say, getting kids killed. And
see, this is where this is where I'm seeing hypocrisy in what happened tonight on that show. Is I get the impression they see guys like Anthony Magnabosco and maybe even myself or whoever picking on one subset of beliefs, the Christian belief here in the United States, and that's, I think, maybe what irks them.
Well, here's what I would say is that what they're putting forward is that we need to be cautious and we need to be ethical in how we do it. Not that SE is just bad in all of its forms, but that it needs to be done with caution, and we need to have a respect for epistemology, I think. And I think that's fair. But at the same time, they see value in faith in a general sense. But there's something that they there's something in particular that they mean by faith, not Boghossian's understanding of it, but what might be described as spirituality, the motivation and the purpose that people find in their faith. They see the value that has to people, and they do not want that to be stripped away from people through some cavalier dismissal.
And I think it's possible for someone to be mistaken about what's in their best interest. And this is up for debate. This just having hope for whatever. If it makes them feel good or whatever intrinsic it is about hope. This is up for debate. I think there's some good reasons to doubt having just hope in things, because hope in the things, these things have consequences, these certain things.
Sure. And I think, if we perceive that someone's hope is in something that's false or something, I think, again, this goes back to the point where if we were to threaten that source of hope, then we should be ready to present an alternative at the same time as a follow-up.
Yeah, the alternative is, like, once you leave that deeply held belief like Christianity, that you start your own YouTube channel and you find meaning and purpose in talking to apologists and pastors. There's great hope and meaning and purpose in that.
So,
but would you say, Doug, that there's you could almost put a name to the greater cause that you're pursuing in doing this?
Yes.
On your channel.
It's called redemption.
That's what you call it? That's
yes,
your label for it?
And I bet you there's former Christians watching right now who are now identify as atheists or agnostics or both, who say, I know exactly what Doug means by that. It's like they've lived their life for decades and realize the harm that they've caused themselves and others. And so a lot of them will use SE as a form of redemption. Am I wrong, Reed? Cam?
That's Matt Dillahunty's main justification, I think, as well.
Oh, really? Oh, man, I thought I was the first guy to say that.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if redemption is the word he used, but yeah, that sounds about like what kind of motivates him. Yeah, it's like making up for, atoning for what
exactly. Yeah.
What you did before, I guess. No, I think Dillahunty in particular has probably more than made up for whatever impact he had as a Christian.
Like, let me give you one short example. When I was a Christian, a fundamentalist, evangelical, conservative Christian who loved Jesus and who loved justice, I refused to go to my brother-in-law's wedding because he was divorced and remarried, and I caused a lot of pain.
All right.
That is stupid. This is what, in my opinion, having certain deeply held beliefs, how it can hurt people. Like, this is not as serious as what you mentioned earlier, Jordan, about someone committing suicide. But there's like hundreds of little things like this that I just mentioned that I think guys like me feel they need to redeem themselves. And kind of, I wish there was a PineCreek guy asking me questions when I was 22.
Right. I think that reminds me. How did I get started on this? Oh, Greg Kokel, actually.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that in the live stream chat too. Like, I don't view SC that much different than the Columbo tactic that Gregory Kokel uses. Like, what do you mean by that? It's like,
so funny because Greg Kokel, like in his tactics book, he put forth like ways of engaging with people that you disagree with, and at least introduced me to fallacies and various arguments that could be made, and so like my critical thinking started there, but then transcended his organization, and
Wow.
and I realized that they were guilty of some fallacies themselves, and realized, oh, every argument for God is fallacious for some reason. Okay, but I guess.
See what go ahead, Cam.
I'd like to get your thoughts on something, and I'm not quite sure I'm representing this correctly, but you were there, Jordan, so you may be able to correct me.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen said something along the lines of that faith to him can mean or does mean something more like a dispositional attitude, or like maybe something that you put into practice, like taking an idea and seeing how by using that idea and doing things with that idea and putting it into action, how it works. And I'm pretty sure he used the word works there. Mm-hmm. And then he said something that sounded like, and it's how things work in practice, or like how it plays out, that gives you the ability to tell if it's true.
Right. I think that's pretty compatible with the way I've come to think of faith since I joined SE and I transcended Boghossian's particular usage. I think the most charitable interpretation of faith is that it's, and the broadest use of it is, it's about taking a risk. And so this is something to keep in mind in certain respects with like presuppositionalists, is that if they have certainty, they don't have faith, because certainty and faith are not compatible. And the only way to take a risk is if you have something you don't know. And so that's what he's getting at with regard to stepping out in faith to see if something is true is taking a risk, or kind of like setting an expectation and seeing how it pans out.
Right. So the difficulty that I have, like, and the reason why I'm motivated to bring this up is because that seems like a very bad way to figure out whether or not things are true.
Right. And he points out that that's not the point. That's not what it's about. Or that's not what that shouldn't be what it's about, I would say. Like, it would be a mistake to do that.
Would you agree that whether or not that's what it's about, that nonetheless concluding something is true on the basis of it working for you or working in practice is fallacious?
That reminds me of what he said with regard to vindication, actually, where like,
because my problem is that, like, as humans, lots of belief systems work for us, which is why there's such a wide variety of, different incompatible belief systems that people put into practice. And when you ask them questions about, well, does this work for you? Like, do you feel happy because of it? Or does it give your life meaning and purpose? People will say yes.
It's vindicated by their experience, and then we come forward with this criticism. I know we do, where there's the potential to fall victim to confirmation bias and counting the hits, ignoring the misses, right.
Even then, like, even if they weren't engaging in any confirmation bias at all, something working for you as a human doesn't tell you whether or not it's true, because we've found through, like, empirically, that it's the case that contradictory things can work for humans. So, like, by that, you automatically know that working for somebody, like something working for somebody, doesn't indicate that it's true.
Right.
You go, Reed.
And it can be more or less true about whatever works. based on certain criteria of what you mean by works. That can be investigated and statistically derived through empiricism or just general inquiry.
Yeah, I feel like I think we're begging for like a good example to play with as we talk about this, but nothing's coming to mind for me right now.
Well, so yeah, actually, it would be good to give an example.
Yeah.
But somebody might have the belief that most people in the world have their interest at heart. Okay. And so they wake up in the morning and they put this belief in practice, and they go out and they interact with the world in a way that presumes that most people they interact with have their interests at heart. And that might work for them. And in fact, it probably will. I think as a disposition, it's quite a practical, like instrumental disposition to have. It will probably, there's a good chance it'll lead to like more positive engagements because you're assuming good intent, and other types of properties like this that, help with social interactions and, might get you further in life and make you enjoy your interactions more. But it might objectively be the case that most people in the world don't have your interests at heart.
Right.
It's very easy for that to be true.
If most of your experience is limited to your bubble or something, sure, yeah.
Right, or like the people who you interact with in a manner where you presume they have your interests at heart. They may not, but still acting as if they do produces better interactions. But it doesn't make your underlying claim true. And I think that's
right.
the issue I'm trying to draw out.
True objectively, right, yeah.
Well, true in the sense that the proposition more than half of the planet have my interests at heart is true. Like,
right. I guess that goes into a discussion about differences between. Well, there's a couple different ways of describing it, I guess. Inner truth and outer truth, or objective versus subjective. We do have these categories of truth where it's like there are beliefs that we come to through our experience, like objective objects lead to discovery, but at the same time we also have beliefs that influence our perception. And so it's kind of like those perceptive beliefs will only determine our interpretation of our experience. Our experience won't actually change them. So these different categories of beliefs have to be treated differently, I think. Because perhaps for one, you use epistemology, but for the other, you're using something else. Does that make sense?
Can I give an example based on the example we just explored? So there's a difference between the proposition half of the world have my interests at heart, and the proposition acting as if half the world have my interests at heart works for me, or has a positive influence on me. So they're very different things, because in one case you're not actually believing, you're not affirming the proposition that more than half or half of the world has your interests at heart. But in the other case, you're affirming the proposition that if you act as though it's true, it will, have some certain effect, and you like that effect.
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of like you're more clear about the distinction between saying something about reality and saying something about your model of it.
Right. Or the disposition you're going to carry forward with respect to reality.
Yeah, you're not pretending to know something you don't know if you just act as if something is true.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I'm not actually too bothered by dispositional attitudes, like, or things in the more instrumental sphere. My issue is when people then take those dispositional things and turn them into propositions about the world. So, like, it might be true. It might be like objectively true, and like we can study it empirically, that having a belief in God, produces certain positive effects over the negation, like, not believing that there's a God. But that doesn't, that's different from there being a God that actually exists, makes your experience that you get when you believe in a God come true. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, those two things are very different. And so, like, if your dispositional attitude was like, I'm going to, act in the world as if there's a God, and then you find that it's positive and it works well for you and you really enjoy it, and like, you have you love your life or whatever, the idea that you can conclude that the belief is true on the basis of that is fallacious in my mind. They're just two separate things. Like, one, the object of like the proposition is about what dispositional attitude will give you what results in the world.
Yeah.
And the other one is a proposition about what actually exists in the world. And they're different.
And we have all sorts of different. We don't have like an agreed upon way of distinguishing between those different kinds of truth. And of course, this is something that's been coming up a lot with like Jordan Peterson. He's been pointing out the fact that there's these different categories of belief, I guess. And sometimes people are just talking about, objective reality, and sometimes they're talking about their perspective of it. Someone taking a shower over there, Reed?
Oh yeah, my roommate's taking a shower.
With the door open?
You can kind of hear it.
No, it's just a very small little Airbnb we're in here.
Oh, I see.
Huh.
Although I appreciate the philosophical discussion Cam and Jordan are having.
Let's make it exciting for the audiences.
Doug, did you mention you wanted to like role play some SE or something like that?
Well, see, okay, for the viewing audience, there was this thing happening on a different YouTube channel, people saying bad things about street epistemology, and then my good friend Reed goes on, and then my good friend Jordan I have access to through the back pipeline channels of Facebook, and I say, hey, Jordan, I'm willing to come on, and Jordan just, how the little check mark, for when you see things.
You can tell I read it.
And no, PineCreek wasn't invited. But if I were invited, if I was, or if I were.
It was just, it was late in the show. I figured they were going to be closing up soon.
But this is what I would have loved to have seen Dr. Jones and Stephen Hoyt witness. I can role play like a fundamentalist, evangelical, conservative Christian like nobody else.
Right.
Except, as a
you
fake,
understand them.
As a fake one. And I would have Reed SE me on air and then allow Dr. Jones and Stephen Hoyt to stop Reed as soon as he makes a bad epistemological epistemic mistake. No, stop. You can't ask that. No.
That's unethical.
Stop it right there. Well,
sure.
How did you come to this belief? No, you can't ask that. You can't ask how you came to believe. What do you believe? No, you can't ask that. Like, this is silliness.
Well, I wouldn't be that dismissive of it, but
I would.
Maybe instead of the confidence scale, we should just have like a hope scale. If someone's at like 100% hope in whatever belief they have, and I could ask, if you no longer held this belief, where would that hope go? Would it go down to like 50 or 0? Maybe that would be something I would be interested in.
That sounds like an interesting question, just in general.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I've never been one to use the confidence scale all that much.
See, Jordan, the reason why I'm being dismissive is because there is an underlying assumption that critics of SE have, and that is that their goal is to dash the hopes of the believer and lead them, some will say, lead them to hell, that they have this concept of what faith is in their head, and they're just waiting to pounce on those unsuspecting Christians or Muslims or whatever about it and just swallow them up and make them look stupid and all these things. There's this assumption, and that the scientific method is always the best in every situation. There's this underlying current that I'm hearing from guys like Stephen that if you're doing SE properly is not there. And it shouldn't be there. It's you're asking the person their perspective of what they believe and how they think they came about it, and then you're asking questions like, okay, I think the outsider test of faith is maybe what really bothers them. If you're telling me you believe X because of some personal vision or experience, and I see someone else tell me that they had a vision and a personal experience as well, and they both claim that they believe this to be true, but yet those two experiences are contradictory, someone has some explaining to do. And of course, an SEer wouldn't say someone has some explaining to do, but they would ask, they would present that outsider test for faith. And that maybe they think that that's bad to even present two situations like that. I don't know. You might know better than me, Jordan.
I get the sense that a big part of it is not being clear or not being disciplined with our usage of terms, like the way that Anthony has historically, at least, been very open about the fact that he wants to plant seeds of doubt. And with, again, the academic understanding of what doubt is, it's equivalent to trying to plant seeds of belief of whatever faith you have. So,
but that's not the way Anthony means it, I don't think. Anthony just...
Exactly. So we need to be more clear about the fact that what we're trying to do is just get people to think critically, to be more comfortable with asking questions, to understand where they stand in relation to other faiths. That's what the outsider test of faith is good for. Understand that you're on equal footing with them. So it just kind of like, fosters a little bit of humility, a little bit of comfort with saying, I don't know, all that stuff. So like, yeah, if we're clearer about that, and the fact that we're not literally going for doubt in the academic sense, then I think that might help.
I personally think that there's very little need to do any of this, because it's why should SES be concerned about judgment that's nearly entirely irrelevant to the practice of what they're doing? Like, why? Like, if we were to do this, would it just be simply to satisfy the Stephen Hoyts of the world? Because that is not an interest of mine.
It's just a matter of like defending the ethics of what we're doing, I guess. So just,
do you think
defending our credibility?
Do you think they believe that it's unethical to raise doubt in people, as a general rule?
Or when raised doubt is just defined as making somebody less confident, right, or causing them to be more introspective and inquirous.
No, the way I've heard him say it a couple times is like to instill doubt for the sake of doubt. That is what they would object to. So I guess, I don't know. What do you think, Reed?
I mean, do they think that if we come across someone who believes the Tic Tacs are even, and we try to instill doubt about their belief that it's even, does that mean that we're trying to make them believe it's odd? Or are we just trying to help them look into it?
Yeah. So the fact that we might try to reduce their confidence in theism is not the same as trying to get them to become atheist. So
yeah, and there's lots of interviews that Reed does in particular that really have no connection to theism as well.
Right, yeah. SE's not limited to the great debate about the gods.
Yeah, and I've had a few conversations with atheists, and I asked the exact same questions. I tried to help them figure out what would change their mind, what could they see or learn.
But it bothers
to change
me,
their confidence.
Reed, it bothers me that you even have to say that, like that. But I also ask these questions of atheists and people who believe in things that have nothing to do with God or supernatural. Like, it's almost like there's no reason to even have to say that and be defensive about it. Like, even if one's goal was to lower the confidence in nobody but a certain sect of Christianity, I don't even think that's bad. Like, why do we need to explain ourselves that, just so we don't hurt the feelings of a few Christians?
Well, there is the part of it where if we're going to be doing this ethically, we should be we should not pretend like we're coming at this discussion with an open mind, I guess. Like, we shouldn't claim that if there's a God, I want to know about it, if we're not actually open to that.
Yeah, but I agree.
Right.
I agree.
I would really hope that there are no SEers out there that say that and don't believe it.
Yeah. So, yeah, just a matter of, again, it's kind of an ethical thing where.
I agree, Jordan, but
if that's what Stephen thinks is going on in the SE community, then maybe the advice for him is to openly, inquire about what people say and what they do, and use the experience from that to change his opinion. Because I don't know any person who practices SE who says stuff for the sole purpose of manipulating the conversation, or who says, I'm open to believing in your God, when they don't actually mean that. So it just sort of seems like an empty charge, and it seems mostly based on the fact that he didn't actually inquire about the real practitioners of SE. He just sort of went with his assumptions.
It seems like mind reading.
He based his impressions based on Boghossian and Anthony, and I don't know why I said a last name and then a first name there, but because Boghossian refers to the exercise as an intervention. It's like, oh, I'm automatically assuming from the get-go that I'm right and there's something wrong with you. And
Boghossian repeatedly put forward the value of being open to changing your mind, like being sincere about the idea that you might be wrong. That is a huge part of every talk I've heard from Peter Boghossian. It's all over the book as well.
It has been a little while since I read it. So
Jesus Garcia asks a question or makes a comment in the chat. He says, just to raise doubt sounds nefarious or nefarious. For what motive would a person want to raise doubt in a person? I'll tell you what motive. And that is, if you're viewing doubt as a form, as meaning to lower confidence or have someone question their deeply held beliefs, it makes them more open to belief revision in the cases where they happen to be wrong. And maybe even in the cases where they happen to be right, but at least they're open to, in the cases when they are wrong, to be more willing to change their mind. And so that's why I think raising doubt is a good thing. Asking questions is a good thing.
Well, also, like, it's here's another way of looking at it. There's something that you believe, right? And it happens to be true. And through the process of talking about it with somebody, you actually become more confident in it when somebody is doing SE on you, because you realize like how much evidence there really is for the belief that you hold. Now, that might also cause you to act on that belief in a way
that happened with me
positively
in a particular example.
And so, like, it's just not the case that, like, the only way that we change our confidence in things in SE is toward 50%.
Right.
You know, we might actually change our confidence toward more certainty, and I'm actually okay with that when it's for good reason. It's like maybe during the course of the conversation, you realize, like, how compelling it really is that these experiences that we commonly attribute to gods, how compelling it is that those things are things that you should question. And maybe you had some lingering doubts about an experience that you had, and through reflection with somebody who was doing SE on you, you realized that no, like, I shouldn't really be confident that that was a god. And that's good. Like, it goes both ways, or the other way around. Like, maybe the theist believes in their god and they become more confident in their god, even though they happen to be wrong.
Like, Jordan, do you think the expectation is though that doesn't really apply to me because of my channel and so forth, but if I were to go out on the street, do you think I'm supposed to have like maybe even a placard or a sign that says, "Hello, I'm an atheist. I like to raise doubt, especially in Christians. I think Christianity is false. I actually think it's silly and borderline evil. Now, may I ask you questions about your deeply held belief in Christianity?" Is that what they're expecting me to do?
I don't think they'd go that far.
I think they just want to get you off the streets, Doug. At least the Cameron Bertuzzis of the world just apparently want to get you off the streets.
Yeah. There's that. He's got a double standard there with SE and the Columbo tactic. We know that much.
But I like working the streets, Cam.
So I was reminded earlier of how I was challenged on the theory of evolution, where like my brother-in-law asked me, where's the evidence for this theory or whatever, and I was like, there's loads of it. It's why it's the main consensus in the field, and but at the same time, as I was saying that, I'm thinking, how much of that am I even aware of? And like I go and I find Arendt's foundational falsehoods of creationism, and then I learn all sorts of new things after that, and my understanding of the theory became much more thorough and cohesive, and so yeah, I was spurred on by just that little bit of questioning to go investigate further, and I ended up coming out of it with more certainty in that conclusion.
Yeah, it's a good point. And so I think that SE can even drive you toward more confidence in something that is true.
Yeah. Now I can defend the theory pretty well with the layman.
Yeah, and it's not even really that SE like drives you towards something. It's just more that it like gives you an opportunity and a motivation to, be self-reflective about something that you believe. And it gives you a space in which you can do that with somebody else. And hopefully that person doesn't have this huge nefarious motivation.
There's something. It kind of escaped my mind for a while, I think. So when Anthony talks about SE, especially in front of like an atheist convention or something, he contrasts SE by first with this thing that he first says, where it's like you get into debates with people, right? And he's like, here's a better way. So SE is presented in a way that it looks like it's a tool to be used to prepare for changing people's minds. And I did bring that up in the show earlier, where SE can be used in two different ways. It can be used almost like and the analogy I made was it's the difference between pure science and applied science, where you can use SE purely to get to know what someone's perspective is, or you can use it to do that and use it as a preparation for debate, to figure out the criteria you need to meet to change someone's mind. It can be used for both of those. You can do it just to get to know someone's perspective, or to get to know how to change it.
Yeah, and so there's quite a bit of controversy within the SE community about which of those two different perspectives is the one that should be considered SE. Because I know that there are a variety of folks from the private group, at least, who they think that really the purpose of SE is, removing faith in the world, and in particular focusing on faith as defined by Peter Boghossian,
Right.
Removing this faith as it applies to theisms.
Right.
And whereas there's actually, quite a number of people who hold a different point of view, that it's really applicable to anything, and it has a more limited goal. As an individual, you might have more of a goal, perhaps based on your past experience. Maybe having come out of Christianity and finding yourself thinking that it's wrong, not only in terms of that it's false, but that it's actually unethical.
Yeah, I would say it's at the very least it's mistaken on several issues. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very difficult to generalize too, because I know some wonderful Christians.
Yeah, I've actually for at least a year now, I've been going back to my family's church because I wanted a community, and there's a large group of people my own age that regularly attend there, and I get along with them really well. That I'm openly atheist with them, and I've had several opportunities to share my perspective with them, and I like to spur on deep conversations with them, but I don't. At least usually, I don't like try to sow doubt in them. I don't try to undermine their faith, because there's a part of it that I appreciate.
Yeah, it might not make you a good community member if that was why you were there.
Yeah, right.
I went to a few Bible studies and things like that when I was an atheist, at my wife's church.
Mm-hmm.
It was quite interesting.
Oh, yeah, that reminds me of what I did, but right before I joined the young adults group at my church, I started attending a small group that they dedicated to apologetics, where they were going over Craig's new book, On Guard. And so we started going through that, and I was like, oh, I've seen these arguments so many times already. And I was there to offer an alternative perspective, because otherwise they were just going to eat it all up. They didn't have, responses to those arguments, baked into the book. Of course, he's not going to put those out there. So I presented, objections to some of Craig's arguments, and I think it spiced the group up a little bit.
I bet. It's probably beneficial for them as budding apologists.
Right.
got to face what you're going to get in the real world, right?
Yeah.
So I'm here at Dragon Con for the next few days. For those who don't know, it's kind of just a super nerdy conference. There's just tons of
Dragon Con?
Dragon Con. And there's like tracks on film, on skepticism, on every kind of sci-fi fantasy genre and subgenre. But there's also this paranormal track, and there's a few panels on Bigfoot. Legitimately people going to panels talking about evidence for Bigfoot and stuff. So is it okay if I use SE on the Bigfoot people? Is that all right?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, if you want to promote some critical thinking there, yeah.
Bigfoot might give them hope.
They paid a lot of money to come to the conference and come to the panel, maybe.
Is it a divine? Is it a divine Bigfoot?
Divine Bigfoot.
No, I think it's the collection
He's
of
got the biggest foot.
Zoological animals that are divine. It's the full category. That's why you got to believe. That's why you got to believe them all. You got to get the Loch Ness, the Bigfoot, the
Sasquatch. Oh man! But speaking of Dragon Con, did you guys get around to seeing Aaron's video on Draxology? Oh, it's a good one. He presented it to, I think, either last year's Dragon Con or the one before, and it's really entertaining. He kind of pokes fun at the phylogeny of dragons. It's really good.
I honestly can't listen to Aaron Ra because it reminds me of my fundamentalist conservative Christian days, and I think of hell when I look at him. Aaron, I love you. I honestly do. You're doing great work, but you need to clean up a little.
It's a little bit like fundamentalism that arises in response to fundamentalism, I guess. There's a little bit of that.
So we need to wrap this up and build a bridge, like I always say. And so the bridge I want to build here for guys like Stephen Hoyt or Dr. Jones is to say that I really appreciate those critiques because I think the backfire effect is real and it's going to just strengthen the SC movement.
I didn't think you were going to go that direction, but okay.
No, that's not building a bridge, Doug.
Oh, yeah. It's not? Okay.
The backfire effect.
But seriously, though, I do think it's good to have the practice of SE critiqued. And
yes,
certainly when you find members of the group expressing that they have no interest in epistemology whatsoever and that they don't think it's relevant.
That's rather telling.
I think it's a problem. And I mean, I don't think that in order to be able to question people about what they believe and why requires you to have done the amount of education that Stephen obviously has.
Right.
But you should at least do some.
Yeah, if you're going to take on SE for the sake of attempting to sway people, then I think it would be ethical to know what you're doing.
Reed, any last words to make the bridge even stronger?
Just maybe ask what SE people believe and to try to understand their position accurately. That would help. But if feel free to keep the criticisms coming. Well, we're here to talk.
Okay, with that, thanks guys for hanging out. I'm going to keep the live stream going for effect, but I'm going to do this and do that and then do that. And now I want you three to do some playful banter, sort of like they can hear the music. It's really loud right now, but like if you guys sort of like talk about some stuff as we're closing out for effect. Can you do that?
This is stuff they would hear or no?
Yeah, but I want you to pretend they can't hear you right now. So really say what you really think.
No, okay, I got you. Oh, man.
That Doug guy's a real jerk.
I really want to see Doug stick it to him. You know?
Stick it to who?
Steven.
Steven?
I want to
stuck it pretty hard to him tonight.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, I want to see face to face you two have a conversation. At some point.
Man, that would be.
I think you should get on the non sequitur show with Steve Hoyt.
Non sequitur, sure.
PineCreek versus Steve Hoyt, non sequitur.
Reed,
Yeah.
I got my own show, Reed.
No.
Yeah.
Non sequitur.
It's getting Hoyt in the PineCreek.
I will somehow lose 20 IQ points just to make it fair.
On that note, good night, everyone.
Doug, you're so humble.
Yeah, I pride myself in my humility.
I've heard that before.